Moth Journal, Paul McMichael, Buchanan, Michigan, October 1988. Every small and insignificant moth is born with everything it needs to build an actual house around itself. Inside this safe house, the moth transforms in secret. First, the larva, or caterpillar, chooses a suitable stem to attach itself to. Then it spins a cocoon, an actual chamber that it at first soft but then becomes hard like a shell, so as to better protect and hide its inhabitant. The larva then transforms into a damp, crumpled creature, splitting the case when the metamorphosis is complete. The moth awakens, unfolds, dries out its wings, and flies away into the rest of its life, leaving behind the tattered remains of a room spun for its own being. Spun for its own being. How can such a miracle be possible? How can any creature create a room from its own being? And why do these facts fill me with happiness, as though I am the first person to discover them? Tonight, for the last time this year, I will take my new truck and my new recipe for moth bait to the clearing between the pond and the river, and if luck is with me, I will find and capture a late flying cecropia or a polymorphus, or, if I am really lucky, a luna. I'll head early to the lab in the morning to show off my captives and share with Mrs. Shelton my foolproof method, tested and perfected in the swamps of her own property, the valleys and prairie and swamps of Riverside, where moths are safe to fly and breed and hide in the birch and maple trees on my river. Chapter 8. Pinned. I overslept. Arrived late to Riverside and found Nora and Christina in the kitchen drinking coffee with their shoulders close, giggling at some private joke. Nora had lately become very chummy with Christina, the two of them always talking and whispering and often working side by side. It didn't seem to bother Bella. Maybe she liked having someone else occupy her mom's attention. But it bugged the hell out of me. "Where's Bella?" I asked them gruffly. They looked up at me, and Christina pointed out the kitchen window toward the lodge. "She's flax-sitting and waiting for her hero. Guess I'd better get to my work before the big boss man fires me." And she strutted out of the kitchen, singing a few lines from an old blues song, "Big Boss Man." Nora lingered as I poured and stirred my coffee. "Can I talk to you just a moment?" she asked. I kept my back to her, and she added, I know, I'm the last person in the world you want to talk to, but this time it's about Christina." "Afraid I got a pretty busy morning." "Oh, you do not. God, you're always acting like everything you do is so much more important than what anybody else does. It's about Christina. I know you like her. I know you appreciate her. And for your information, Christina and my dad went to the same high school. She actually remembers him." Deep sigh of boredom. "Look, I just need you to explain to me what the deal is between Christina and Abe. I have no idea what you're talking about." "Come on, you must have noticed. I mean, does Abe like Christina? Does he have any feelings towards her?" I have to admit, I've been wondering this very thing myself ever since Christina and Bella came back from their vacation. I knew that Abe genuinely enjoyed having Christina around, but I didn't know what she meant to him. Not really. Still, I was not about to enter into a discussion about it with Nora. "I have work to do," I reminded her, turning to leave the room. "She's crazy about him," Nora persisted. "Have you noticed how she stares at the back of his head all the time? And how she's always quoting something he said? Does Bella know? Has she ever mentioned it to you?" "Bella's noticed," I admitted. "Is Abe just completely unaware?" I shook my head. "He's hopeless about women, just really, really shy." "How did he get that way? My dad wasn't shy. Christina said he had lots of girlfriends. Lots of girls had crushes on him. But Abe, do you think he's ever had a girlfriend?" "Never," I reported. "Don't you think we should try to help him?" "Help him what?" "I don't know, get over his shyness, get closer to Christina so he won't be so all alone." This made me feel defensive. "He's not all alone." She rolled her eyes at me. "Oh, come on, Shelton. He lives by himself in a cabin in the woods, and the only place he ever goes is to his office here. He's almost 30 years old, and he doesn't have any friends except you, and he's never had a girlfriend. That's alone. Get a clue." I scowled. Oh, I know, she added, and you and Abe go way back, but don't tell me you're never planning to leave this place, like you won't ever go to college or live anyplace else or have a girlfriend yourself, and it's not like your grandparents are going to live forever either. Wake up, they're old. Geez, I protested. Be a little negative, why don't you? She was turning to leave, but before she disappeared, I threw out one last defense. Maybe it's not so bad, being a loner. You would know, she said, without turning around. Yeah, well, you would know too. Then she did turn around. Okay, so we're both loners, so we know what that's like, but Abe isn't a loner. He's alone. There's a difference. She left me scowling over my coffee. The last word again. For the next couple of days, I found myself paying more attention to the way Abe acted around Christina, testing my theory that Abe really did like Christina more than was obvious to the untrained eye. He no longer avoided the visitor center on the days that she came in. He let her constantly rearrange the kitchen without complaining. He put up with her occasional teasing, even though it obviously embarrassed him. He'd even start calling her by her first name, pronouncing it strangely with an accent on the final A, like it was a difficult name for him to get his mouth around. Sometimes, when she wasn't around, he would speculate aloud about what he might ask her to do the next time she came in. It wasn't much, but it was a lot for Abe. So, while he and I were surveying the prairie, I carefully brought up the subject. Abe, do you remember how at first you said you didn't want any volunteers at Riverside? He lifted his binoculars to his eyes. I remember. Who would have ever thought we'd find somebody as great as Christina, right? Somebody who cares about this place just as much as we do. I waited for his reaction, but he kept silent, scanning the prairie. Abe, still scanning, he asked. Have you been talking to Nora about this? About what? Christina. Well, maybe she said something. I was just making a comment about... Abe cut me off. Nora has decided that I don't like being alone, but I think you know me better than that, Pete. He lowered his binoculars. I'm glad that Christina is part of the team. Bella, too. And you're right, they do care about this place. It's been good having them here. We're all very lucky this summer. Lucky? I was momentarily taken aback by his choice of words. Lucky was the last word I would have used to describe how I felt that summer. But I liked hearing him say it. I also liked hearing him say that I knew him better than Nora. In fact, the pleasure of this compliment settled over me as I strode through the prairie grass beside him. Man to man, we chose a perfect future site for an observation deck, in complete agreement as usual. Then we drove back to the center in a comfortable silence. All was well between us. I knew him best. Being a loner was fine, noble even. Nora was wrong. I knew better. Abe and I were lucky. Did you ask him? Nora whispered. It had been a long, hot day. I was in the office tallying up bills for installing the windows in the lodge, and I was tired. Drop it, I said. Don't bug Abe, and don't encourage Christina. Nora scowled. I will not drop it, just because you can't be bothered to think about it. I did think about it. I even asked Abe about it, and he said he's fine with things the way they are. She was exasperated. Well, of course he would say that to you. Look, is there something else you want to talk about? Because we're finished with this subject. Big mistake to invite her to choose a new subject. She paused and tipped her head, her expression suddenly challenging. We could talk about moths, she said. We are not talking about moths. Did I mention that I painted my bedroom? I painted the walls and the ceilings dark blue, so they would look like a night sky, and then, Nora, I don't care. I hung the moth cases in 2 rows, one on each wall, right about shoulder high. I was suddenly angry again. I slammed down my pen and glared at her, warningly. She wasn't fazed. Do you know why Abe is so weird about those moths? She asked in a rush. He didn't even want me to hang them on the walls. Are you deaf? I said I don't care. You do so care. Jesus, would you just leave me alone? I'm through talking to you. Get out of here. Grudge holder, she hissed, exiting. Christina entered the next moment, wearing a paint-spattered bandana over her hair and a now what have you done expression on her face. Don't give me that look, Christina. You don't know how hard it is, having her in your face every day. Oh, come on. Are you two fighting about those moths again? We are not fighting about the moths. She wanted them, she got them, and that's the end of it. She feels guilty, Pete. She knows they were important to you. Maybe if you two could just sit down and have a little heart-to-heart. Christina, I don't care. If Nora wants to put them in her bed and sleep with them, I don't care. She sleeps with them? Christina repeated, aghast. I covered my face. No, she doesn't actually sleep with them. She hung the cases on the wall of the pantry. She sleeps in a pantry? It used to be a pantry. Abe made it into a bedroom. So you're saying she hung her father's moth collection on the walls of her bedroom? Oh, Pete, that's so beautiful. Isn't that just too beautiful to bear? I got up and left the room, needing air. Again, I had the feeling of being a trespasser, not so much unwelcome as disconnected to the cabin now, clearly on the outside. But I entered. I moved quickly through the rooms, through the empty kitchen. The door of the pantry was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and let a slight breeze move through the tunnel of Nora's room. The space held her fragrance, her shampoo and her laundry and her perfume. On the table at the head of her bed were 2 cheaply framed photographs, one of Eleonora standing in front of a barn, and one showing 2 bare-chested, curly-headed boys in a canoe. The smaller of these boys was a miniature Abe, waving at the camera with an open hand. The other boy was older and taller, manning the oars with a somber, knowing smile. I looked at the walls. Nora had painted them a dark cobalt blue and mounted the wooden moth cases on either side of her bed in 2 shoulder-high rows, leading in parallel lines to her little window. 5 on one side, 6 on the other, all but the broken cecropia. I had to admit, it was a dramatic sight. My heart ached. I stood a long moment, feeling something unfamiliar, a kind of longing I didn't fully understand. I ducked my head at the doorway while passing through. As I emerged back into the kitchen, I saw that someone was standing at the sink. It startled me so thoroughly that for a moment the room spun around my head. I closed my eyes tightly, then opened them. I saw that it was Nora. "If you don't care, why are you here?" she asked. Her eyes were the brightest blue I'd ever seen. What could I say? There was nothing to say. She followed me on her bicycle and caught me trespassing, invading her bedroom, and perhaps worst of all, caring enough about what she'd done with the moths to do all these things. I had no defense. I stood, silent as a muzzled dog, and waited for whatever her reaction would be. She took several steps towards me, and it occurred to me that she might slap me, which I would have also had to endure, and I tightened my jaw and shoulders in anticipation. But to my complete surprise, she instead grabbed one of my useless hands, tugged at it, and led me back into the pantry. "This is the first room of my own I've ever had," she said. "When Abe first put that window in, I was so mad that I wouldn't even speak to him. I had even started packing, pretending I had somewhere else to go. But Abe wanted to make it right again between us, so he went back to Riverside and got the window. And when he came back, he asked me to help him install it, and I did. I helped him, even though I still wasn't speaking to him. We did it in complete silence. When we were finished, he told me that all the McMichaels were good carpenters, and that I was a good carpenter too. Me, who would have never picked up a hammer in my life, but I still kept acting like I didn't care. And for a few days after that, every time he asked me if I was happy about the window, I told him I didn't care. For a whole week I said I didn't care. He had given me my own room and put a window in it for me. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me before. It was so unbearable. So I said I didn't care, because it was painful, how much I cared. Her eyes were killing me. I needed to look past them, and away from her face and her mouth, to the moths. My eyes settled on the emerald green Luna, the moth nearest to the open window, and I focused hard on it and took a few deep breaths, trying to find a way out of my confusion and embarrassment. When I turned my eyes back to her face, I saw that the sunlight from the windows was backlighting her, shadowing her eyes, accenting her lower lip. She looked so beautiful, and it was scary to suddenly be seeing her as beautiful. I think she sensed my fear, because her face grew softer. "You do that too," she said. "You say you don't care." I shook my head. "I don't even know you." "Yes, you do. You know me. I'm like you." I stopped shaking my head. stopped refusing to accept what she was saying. I let my body fill with relief and longing, both at once. Slowly, I put a hand on each of her shoulders and pulled her against me. She didn't resist. She came to me easily and let me hold her tightly. I clung to her for a moment and then instinctively pulled my head away from her shoulder and leaned in. In that narrow room, standing in a square of light from her window and surrounded by moths, I kissed Nora. Our arms came around each other somehow, and we were joined from head to toe, as if we were in a display case ourselves, pinned to each other and to our kiss. It was a long moment, but it passed finally, and I released her at the same moment she released me. The end of our kiss was a mutual gasp. I looked around myself one more time, and then I bolted. I rushed from the bedroom, the kitchen, the cabin, the driveway, fumbling back into my truck and heading back to Riverside, still feeling her mouth against mine and thinking, what just happened?